Hello, Carrots here. Welcome to Eric's story, part 2. I'm hoping to get through all of Eric's story in this episode, but there's rather a lot to show, so it might go into 3 episodes. We'll see what happens. I'm opening up to the story with the closing scene of part 1. There is Hayley at the computer with her imaginary friend, Pat. Hayley won't be turning Pat real until after she has moved to Lucky Palms and has got a large family, and she needs a nursemaid for her children. I tend to ignore my imaginary friends. I make every baby who's born in the game have one. It's a good free babysitter for me, but I usually just leave them in their inventory and don't bother about them unless I want them for some purpose later on. As a result, I rarely get to age them up, but when I do, it's a bit of fun. Bob, sitting in the chair there, is Percy's imaginary friend who we saw him turned real in the previous episode. And the Sim who just sat down is Percy's wife, Lorna, who is now a young adult, but she was an elder in the previous episode, and Percy gave her a potion, and now she's at the beginning of the young adult stage. If you didn't see the previous episode, you've missed watching them age down and be turned into a real Sim. Meet toddler Eric. He's in his usual place, on his own, outside in the snow. Now that's Davy Linnell, a babysitter there, the blonde in the front yard, and the active Sim is Eric. And Hayley has come over to visit to make sure Eric's okay. When I was playing this part of the game, I used to play a household for a while until I got it to a point where I felt comfortable to leave it, and then I'd move on to a different household. And at this point, when Eric was a toddler, I had not played his household for a while, and Hayley, I had played her for a little while, and she'd become married to Bob, the imaginary friend of her half-brother Percy, who Percy made real in the previous episode of Introduction to Eric, and she and Bob have had a son, Harry, who is a toddler, and Hayley's come over to see if Eric's okay and left her own toddler at home, who's also sitting in the snow. This gameplay you're seeing now is from an old save that I'd kept, and when I opened it, the active household was one of the households of townies from Dragon Valley. So I swapped across to Eric's household because Eric is the one that I wanted to show you and talk about. I remember while playing this game way back in 2015, I used to see Eric sitting in the snow on his own more than any other toddler in town. And Hayley, I noticed, often came over to rescue him autonomously. So I wasn't entirely surprised when I activated this household to find Eric sitting in the snow and Hayley over there at her half-brother's house when she could have been at home with her own toddler. After doing a little investigation, I discovered that Eric's parents are having lunch together at the bistro, so I headed on over there and found Gabby and her husband Aaron flirting outside. Aaron Finnegan is a townie from Dragon Valley who has married Gabby Coffey. Gabby is Percy's full sister, and Aaron and Gabby have a son who's a toddler and about the same age as Eric and Harry. So there's 3 little cousins there now that we can talk about and maybe even visit. We'll definitely be looking at Harry. Not too sure if we'll have a look at Andy. As Gabby and Aaron chatted outside the bistro, a few Sims walked by. There's Percy. Now Percy is Gabby's brother, and that's one of the O'Reilly girls, I think. She's from Dragon Valley. So Percy's not in the slightest bit concerned about leaving poor little Eric's at home sitting in the snow. And here comes Lorna, now that she's young again. And she and Percy are out on the town regularly, going to various locations just to have fun together. But she's going to go home, so hopefully she will pay some attention to little Eric when she gets there. And Eric is still sitting in the snow. That house, by the way, is in the library it came with. It's an EA made house. It's not one I made. I don't know if it came with an expansion pack or not. Looks like Lorna decided to go inside and play computer games until I told her to go get Eric and teach him to walk. At least Hayley was keeping him company, sitting there reading her book in the sun and the snow. She's not very warmly dressed, is she? And Eric begins his walking lessons. He'll probably have the rest of his lessons when he's at the boarding school, because I don't think I'll manage to get either of his parents to try to teach him much. She's only teaching him to walk now because I told her to. She actually wanted to go and play computer games. Now, I'd had no control of Hayley, but now I've swapped to her household, and she's come home. It's getting dark, it's getting late. She's still living in the same place with her husband, Bob, and their baby, or their toddler son, Harry. And I'll get her to feed him, so she'll give him a bottle. I don't use high chairs usually in my games because the toddlers spend too much time just sitting in the high chairs screaming, and if I tell them to take them out of the chair, they take them out and then put them straight back in again. I have too many Sims to control to be worried about constantly telling someone to take a toddler out of a high chair. That was Bob just walked back inside there then. They've also got a plum bot called Pearl, I think it's Pearl, that Hayley made. It's a bit cold out there, but he is at least warmly dressed and he's not actually in the actual snow, but he's finished his bottle and he wants to come inside. He's been abandoned. He feels abandoned anyway. So I'll get Bob to spend a little bit of time with him, teaching him to walk. Bob is an excellent father. He takes a lot of care of his children. Bob has been put into the ghost hunting career by the game, and I left him in that career. He got to level 10 really fast too. Perhaps that's a secret of how to get your sim to level 10 and as a ghost hunter. Just put them in an unplayed household while they're in that career. It'll take them no time to get to level 10. So I think that career is a bit broken and it's almost impossible to get your sim there to the level 10 if you're playing them. And I've got a few level 10 ghost hunters in this save, and they've all got there by being left up to the game to control them. So there is little Harry getting his first lessons in walking. Bob looks like he's tired, he needs to go to sleep. When I first activated this household, I was surprised to see that Hayley and Bob had already divorced, but she hasn't moved out yet. I'll leave this little household and move on now to the boarding school, where we will find some of the toddlers in attendance, learning their toddler skills. I don't have mods in this game at this point to allow more than 8 Sims to a household, so the numbers I can have at the boarding school are restricted to a maximum of 8. Later on, when I'm playing Oscar's part of this game, I'll have 20 or more at the boarding school at any one time. I'll say goodbye to Bob and his family right now while I take us to the boarding school. The sim with her back to us in the green dress is my very old sim, Ella, in her original state. I first made Ella back in June 2009, and back then their makeup couldn't be made opaque, so she's got very harsh makeup on at the moment. And the other one facing us is, of course, another old friend, Sally, and here she is as a brand new, very young adult version of herself. However, she does make a wonderful babysitter, which is not something that can be said for Alice, who is off chasing ghosts. She's another one that the game has put into the ghost hunter career. I added her to the boarding school as a nanny along with Sally and Ella, but she didn't work out, so I moved her out eventually. So I'll just leave her there to chase spirits. In case you're wondering, that hair she's wearing is from the Katy Perry stuff pack. When I realised where she was ghost hunting, I decided that I would show you around the premises, because this house belongs to another of Percy's brothers. It's his younger brother, Greg. At this point, Greg is married to his wife, Fran. They eloped to Sunlit Tides. Their elopement was the very first time I ever ventured into using the NRAS Traveller mod. I didn't know how to use it very well. They spent 3 days there in Sunlit Tides for their wedding, and then I couldn't get them home again. So I went back to an earlier save and they had a private wedding at home. But I got the pictures of the wedding in Sunlit Tides, and later on I worked out how to do it. I think I was using too much memory the very first time. Reduced a few settings and things, and from then on in it was all good. Greg and Fran don't have any babies yet, but they do have 3 plum bots. My attempt to use the staircase from the Now and Then Century Manor set from the store. Here's Gary come home now. This house is set up for parties, so only part of it is accessible to guests, and to get to the private parts, they have to enter through a spiral staircase, not up through the main central staircase where the guests will go. And for some reason, Gary's decided that he's going to sleep in the little boat bed. I suppose once they've had a family, they've got actual children, then the children will probably have that bed and he'll go into the main room. I have to share with you my most favourite photo ever of Fran. I just have to show you my favourite picture of Fran ever. It's when she's riding my scary roller coaster. That scary roller coaster is in my studio on the Exchange. I also managed to get the whole household together. That dog of theirs is the parent of the dog that lives in the boarding school. And the boarding school dog is called Menelaus. And it has got to be one of my most favourite sim dogs ever. It looks like Alice is chasing ghosts inside the house now. She's up in the private area. The whole place is green. I think that indicates it's inhabited by spirits or ghosts or something. As you can see, I don't have things filling up all of the spaces, but we've done quite a lot of work down on the ground floor. The garden isn't really big, not by my standards, but it's growing. Mostly they've been down there making plum bots and nanites and things like that, and learning the advanced technology skill. I've also got a large store of insects down the stairs. I'm sure they'll all come in useful at some point. As you can see, they've been busy. Not only have Gary and Fran been busy, but the 3 plum bots have also been developing skills, particularly in advanced technology. And we've got a few gnomes around the place, and they've done some inventing as well. It looks like Alice has decided that she's got all the ghosts she's going to get from this lot, and she's heading off home. As Alice travelled home, I popped over to the little Corsican bistro to see if there's anything interesting happening there. And I found Giles Coffee and Geordie Goldsmith, a pair of witches, having some sort of a spell-casting duel. It looks like Giles won that one. You'll see quite a bit of Geordie later on in the big game, because he gets married to one of the genies in the game and they have a hybrid baby. Popped over to the boarding school expecting to see Alice had arrived home, but she hadn't. But we did find Lucy was there now. Now Lucy is the 4th babysitter, and she is pale blue and a genie. She's one of the early genies I made, and you'll see quite a lot of her as well. She spends a long time in the boarding school, and eventually she marries a fairy, and they have hybrid children as well. I've put 4 toddlers in the boarding school just for this video, and they're all related, they're cousins, and I'll give you the details from the oldest to the youngest. The eldest is Richie Hansen, and he is the son of Henry and Siobhan. I have the toddler age set to 150 days to allow me plenty of time to get to them and put them through the boarding school. Richie's got 24 days to go before he's due to age up automatically, and I'll put him back with his parents and let it just happen in due course. Some of them I age up with a cake. Depends on what I'm doing in the game, and usually only on their actual birthday. I noticed Richie's little brother Raymond, who's just aged up to become a toddler, has been left at home alone by their parents. The next eldest at the boarding school is Sammy Coffee. His parents are Giles and Susie, and Susie was Susie Sackholm from Dragon Valley. Sammy doesn't have any siblings yet, but he will get a baby sister later on. Sam is due to age up in 58 days. And the next little toddler is little Harry. We've already met Harry. This is Bob and Hayley's little boy, and he is an imaginary friend. And there is Sammy playing with his imaginary friend. And that screaming toddler in the background being held by Ella is Eric, who is the youngest. Harry's due to age up in 129 days, and little Eric is due to age up in 133 days. And there's lots of other toddlers that come in between the 2 youngest and the 2 eldest that we've got in the boarding school at the moment. And finally we come to feature little Eric, who is going to be the star, or be the co-star with Oscar for the rest of Oscar's childhood. Now Eric is getting to know all of his relatives by way of the boarding school, because in a normal Sims game, when you just play one household, they often don't get to know each other very well. But by putting Sims of various ages and from different worlds and different households through the boarding school together at various times, they get to meet each other, and I found the towns get much more dynamic because Sims who normally never meet, even though you might have them in a game for Sim years, they just don't get to know each other. You put their children into the boarding school and suddenly you've got Sims interacting with each other in unexpected ways, and I found the game got a lot more fun overall after I'd had a few generations or a few sets of Sims through the boarding school. So I'll leave it here with little Eric learning to play the xylophone. He will come back, he'll do his toddler skills at the boarding school, and then he'll come back to a different group of Sims to get to meet all of them to do his child skills. But by then I will have decided to keep him at the boarding school permanently. And so he's going to know lots of his relatives as well as lots of other Sims from different worlds. So it should be really good for Oscar, because he's also going to be living at the boarding school permanently, and he'll get to meet lots of other Sims too. Unexpected problem. Menelaus's mother and girlfriend have turned up, and his mother is shredding the chair. Menelaus is the one that's barking. He lives there. It's Sally's dog. Looks like Alice has been left to clean up the puddle. She's not happy. So thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you in part 3 of Eric's story. Bye bye for now, and happy simming.